This is China's position in the world relative to the Indian subcontinent we talked about in the previous chapter. China has a diverse geographic and ecological history. Its north is arid, bounded by the Gobi Desert. The west is dry and mountainous, borders Afghanistan today. The east is nourished by two major rivers. The Yangtze in the south is deep and broad like the Mississippi. It's good for irrigation and stability for development. The Yellow River in the north is shallow and prone to flooding, thus causing devastation. The Chinese are believed to have gained knowledge of the wheel, metallurgy, etc. from Indo-European nomads, possibly the Aryans we had mentioned that had invaded India. Thousands of characters uniform through all of China allowed different dialects that could still read the same characters, creating a strong culture. Central to this culture was the concept of filial piety, or the worship of dead ancestors. People clung to their villages out of respect for their dead relatives. The Zhaos ruled from 1122 BCE until about 300 BCE. Central to their rule was the concept of a mandate of heaven, that the dynasty had the allegiance of God behind them and previous ancestors of Chinese rulers. If a dynasty failed due to war, famine, economic collapse, etc., that meant it lost its mandate and a new dynasty would emerge. To govern, they formed a centralized government, allowing nobles to rule over their areas. Sometimes these nobles would challenge the central government, and eventually the main dynasty was weaker than its parts, governed much like a confederacy. In the United States, we had a civil war. The South had a confederacy. They did not have a strong central government. It was more for states' rights, whereas today in the United States, we have a strong central government with a president and the federal bureaucracy in Washington and the states below that. The Zhao traded with many peoples and learned how to cast iron. This allowed for better and more affordable weapons, along with heavy plows to create deep furrows for better agricultural yields. Confucius lived from 551 BCE to 479 BCE. Just as Buddha and later Jesus, Confucius left no writings for verification. He wanted to create a better system and tried to be an official, but later wandered the countryside as a teacher. Following his death, his followers published works of his various sayings. Foremost, he believed in social order. There were three pillars: humanity involving compassion, ritual, the etiquette to treat each other better, and filial piety. The main tenets of this philosophy were to create order in society. So Confucianism isn't necessarily for religion. The government respected the people, and vice versa, children respected their parents. Taoism came to force around 500 BCE. Laozi was an old sage and believed in an unchanging cosmic force, Tao, or the way. One must live in harmony with nature. Be passive, contemplate your thoughts rather than speaking, meditation. Central to his philosophy was the concept of yin and yang. Yin stands for male, light, life. Yang stands for female, dark, death. Nature needs both forces to work in harmony. This is the natural symbol for yin and yang. Legalism started during the late Zhao era. As tribes warred against each other, there was another call for stability. Zunzi, a Confucian scholar, also wanted order. However, he thought that strong governments should use force for people to obey laws. Rulers needed to impose law to keep stability. A legalist by the name of Li Si assisted Xiongdi to begin the Qin Dynasty from 231 BCE to 210 BCE. He was the first ever to unite northern and southern China. He is known as the first emperor and set his capital in Xi'an, famous for its palace that could house up to 10,000 people and his tomb with an army of terracotta statues. He killed the warlords of the different states and created a centralized government with his appointed loyal nobility. He was also brutal against philosophers and teachers. He didn't like intelligent people because they might ask questions against him. He is known for massive infrastructure projects, irrigation systems, canals, and also the famous Great Wall of China, which was created to prevent attacks by wandering nomads. This is a picture of the Great Wall of China, one of the ancient wonders of the world. The Han Dynasty ruled from 200 BCE to 200 CE. After his death, the people felt liberated from the harsh rule of Li Si, and civil war erupted again. His son, the second emperor, could not keep control, and heaven's mandate was passed to the Han Dynasty under Li Bing. Confucianism became the main ideology as the educated ran the bureaucracy, but he still ruled under the legalist idea of a strong centralized government. Eventually, the Hans created a civil service test based upon Confucius thought. At its height, the Han expanded into northern Vietnam, the Korean Peninsula, and Western Asia. You can see how large the Han Dynasty had become as it went into other areas. This expansion cost the Han great resources and weakened its financial position. Eventually, the Han fall as floods and plagues kill millions. And in Han society, just as in India, women were considered subordinate to males. In China, young girls were subordinate to their father, then to their husband, and if widowed, subordinate to their sons. However, they were supposed to be treated with respect, no purdah or sati as in India. Some inventions included wheelbarrows to cart goods easier and water mills to grind grain. All in all, China would become a large empire. They would start to make contact with the outside world, and as we had mentioned in the previous chapter, part of this connection was via sea, but most importantly the Silk Road that connected China through Asia and eventually trading to European areas.